Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of What's on Your Shelf. I'm your host, Mulura Mike, and today we are privileged to sit with a veteran journalist, a guy who's been in this media and communication space for quite a while. Ladies and gentlemen, on What's on Your Shelf today, we have Kwamchetsi Makokha. I hope I've said that right.
Thank you. That name gives people a lot of challenges. It's Kwamchetsi.
Kwamchetsi.
Yes, Kwamchetsi Makokha. But I'm very easy on people struggling with it. I'm a literary aficionado.
Yes.
Somebody who loves books. I'm a student of life. I'm very simple. I like reading. Well, I don't like reading. I am compelled to read. I got into journalism when I was 18. If the confidence has gone down, it is because Kenyans expect better.
A little background about you, what you do, and maybe your journey as a communicator and who actually you are.
Yeah, that's very difficult. It's very difficult to describe yourself. It's always much easier when people describe you, then they can put labels on you. I have done many things. I've been very privileged. I've been very privileged to sit in spaces where significant things are happening. So I've sat in a publishing house for 2 years and worked with some of the best editors in this region who taught me how to do book production. And when we were learning book production, one of the things we learned was manuscript assessment. So I spent those first 2 years just assessing manuscripts that are coming in. You read them and you write a reader's report. And now on the basis of that, then they make a decision if this is going to be a book or not. So I spent quite a bit of time then reading. At that time, we would do an average of about 3 manuscripts a week. And some of them would be about 200, 300, 400 pages. And some of them, of course, would be from very big names. And then, of course, sometimes you'd write a report saying, you don't think this doesn't make sense or this is not publishable. And then, of course, some of them would not take it very well. So that's really like where it comes from. But it comes from a love for literature that I think was bred from an early age. I started reading in high school and it's just the usual stuff. And then, of course, got attracted to expression, how people express their thoughts, how people express their fears and their hopes. And words then begin to carry dreams. And I found that very fascinating. So this thing of curating words became it became a calling for me, this thing of being able to use words as a channel and a facility to enable people to express themselves, to express their fears, their hopes, and to dream about the future. So that's where it began. And then of course, you can love literature, but you also got to pay the rent. You got to pay your bills, and so you find utility for that love for literature, and the places that you find that it could sort of could be turned into currency was more in the space of journalism. And so I found myself in journalism, where I have been on and off. I don't know if you can ever leave because it's one of those ones. It's a Hotel California situation. Yeah. You can check in anytime, but you can never leave. I got into journalism very early. I think I must have been 20. No. I misstate that. I got into journalism when I was 18. Straight out of high school, I began as a correspondent for Kenya Leo, which was a sister paper of Kenya Times. And I did a bit of writing there. It wasn't very successful. Then much later, and then I got into KBC, and I used to run a talk show in my college days. And subsequently now got interested in TV production. So did that. So you see, it's all this thing about words and to do with them. So that's how I ended up in this space. But my relationship with books was cemented from that 2 years I did my readership at East Africa Educational Publishers, where I was a reader, grew from a reader to a proofreader, to an editor. And then now that combined with journalism training enabled me now to be able to navigate communication spaces.
Yeah. Wow. And if you're meeting Mr. Makokha today for the very first time, he has an elaborate career. You can Google him. And he's very modest in describing who he is. So I want to leave that to you. Just check him out and you'll see a huge body of works that this guy has done. But because of the length of the conversation that we have today, Mr. Makokha, but now just looking into that background now, you as a reader, you as somebody who is, there's a term you used, you said you are a what in literature? There's a new term I met, I thought I would remember it. There's how you described who you are with books.
Yes, I'm a literary aficionado.
Yes.
Somebody who loves books.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
To the foundations of that, now if you look at it in hindsight today, where do you think that began?
It just began, I think, if you are to be honest, it began at my grandmother's hearth and my mother's hearth. The fireplace, where, you would hear stories. And those stories were so fascinating. And I remember also the teachers who were most successful with me were the ones, my English teachers, who would intersperse their lessons in between teaching you about tenses and phrases and rules, would intersperse it by actually telling you a story. So the storytellers in my life have been very influential. Start with my grandmother, my mother, my teachers. So that's where it began. It began right there. And then it has now grown and become something. It's become something very tangible and very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there perhaps maybe in your early years where you can remember, I don't know, a particular book, like maybe now just built it beyond the fireplace, but now the physical ink and paper that you can say, this now sparked my curiosity, or this now led me into this trajectory?
Books were very rare growing up. Books were very, very rare. So I remember, I think we read a passage. We read a passage from Ngugi's The River Between, somewhere around class 6. And I was just blown away. I mean, how could you say something so beautifully and so innocently? So that was my first experience. I didn't even read it. I think it came from an examination passage that was being examined, I think, for class 7 at that time. And so there and about. So then I got into a high school where there was quite a bit of books. So Barbara Kimenye was a very, very big early influence. So I'm looking at the entire Moses series. Then the children's writing, we underrate the children's writing, but it has such a huge influence on how we then shape life and what we see. So those early contributors, the early contributors to my reading, my love for reading, it's because the stories were just so captivating and well told that they were unforgettable. And then, of course, fast forward to now being introduced to what you would call the qualities. In my more sort of maturing years, of course, we'd all been raised on Achebe and Ngugi and everybody else, but the guys who completely blew my mind, if you ask me, is V.S. Naipaul. V.S. Naipaul's A House for Mr. Biswas. I was like, how can you be that funny? Yeah, how can you be that funny and that real? Then, of course, as you go there, of course, you get introduced to other writers. And in my sort of 20s, B.E. Bandele Thomas was a big influence. So I'm thinking about The Sympathetic Undertaker and Other Dreams. I'm also thinking about Ben Okri, The Famished Road. I'm thinking about, and then of course there are other influences. The South African struggle. The South African struggle was always with me because there was this haunting story, Cry the Beloved Country, Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country. And that introduced me now to this other world. And I always sort of felt like I'm half South African just because of the experience of reading Paton, Arthur Fugard, and then of course even the later ones, Disgrace, Kotsi, reading Eskiel Mphalele, and the others. South Africa became a very, very important space because they found a way of channeling their rage and their outrage about their lived situations and the contradictions in their lives into their literature. And that just transported me. It transported me from Nairobi or Lugari to District 6 in Cape Town. And so even in much later in life, when I had an opportunity to go to those places, I was like, so these are the places that actually shaped me. So I was shaped by places that were not necessarily geographically proximate to me. Yeah, so there was all that. Of course, we had a very rich menu. Growing up of... we read everything that we could access. So if we got a chance to read The Americans, The Catcher in the Rye, To Kill a Mockingbird, the usual Margaret Atwood, we sort of like just, we ran through them because really books weren't that many. It wasn't very easy to come across books. And so the ones that you came across, you read them ravenously. Then, of course, you got introduced to the European literature. Of course, you'd love One Piece or Anna Karenina, Tolstoy, or the Shakespeare. Even with the arcane language, it becomes it's sort of a vernacular. You get used to it, and it grows on you.
Wow, that's really, really, really insightful. But now that leads us to my most important question on this podcast. What's on your shelf?
Maybe you should ask me what's not on my shelf. I'll tell you what's not on my shelf are probably the 3 most important books I have read. Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. I read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist overnight, and I quit my job that week. That's how influential it was. It's very, very simply told, but it's one of those. I mean, I would never have thought I was the type to read. I thought I'm an intelligent reader, so I thought, this sort of motivational. It looks a bit like a motivational sort of story, but it's actually a story. So I read The Alchemist, and my skin was tingling, my hair was standing on edge. I was like, my life can't go on the same way it has after this. Yeah, so I finished reading that book. I put it together, closed it, put it there, and then I sat there and I plotted how I was going to resign. So I resigned from a fairly well-paying job because I was like,
take us into that moment.
How I'm going to live.
Take us into that moment. What is going through? what is happening in your life at that point?
You're growing up.
Yeah,
you're growing up. You want more out of life, and if you are in this country in the late 90s, effects of structural adjustment programs, you are being told to stay in your lane and to wait for your time. And to, if your dreams will wait, you are the leaders of the future. You're the leaders of tomorrow. And this character, Santiago, in The Alchemist, pursues his dream. And some of it, doesn't take you to a logical place of conclusion. But he pursues it anyway. And then there are all these other things that Coelho does, a bit of that Brazilian or South American witchcraft, where, the universe, if you know your destiny, the universe will conspire to help you beat your fate. And so he weaves all these things together, and it's very, very convincing. And it impelled me in a manner almost like Jesus impelled people. Jesus impelled people to take charge of the fact that they have a divinity in them and they need to, live it up. So that's, it's not here. It's on my bookshelf in Kitale. Okay. That's not on my bookshelf right now. I would also say the other book that is not here is the Sympathetic Undertaker and Other Dreams, because it was just wild, because it's this thing about, it talks about a schizophrenic university student in Nigeria at a very dangerous time when there were military coups and people were being silenced, detained, killed. And so this writer, B. Badele Thomas, who passed on, I think, about last year, uses the bipolar sort of schizophrenic character of he's half mad, but in his moments of lucidity he has such clarity. And I was just taken up. I was just taken out because like this was a manual. This was a manual on how to overcome and how to beat censors. And we have a very long and rich history of censors, people who are doing censorship, interfering with thought, interfering with the transmission of ideas. And the sympathetic undertaker and other dreams for me did the magical thing, which was you can actually, if you are patient enough, you find a clever way of saying all the things you want to say, and no one can stop you. The third book that's not here, just for the beauty of it, and I always like to. I've given this to my daughter. I don't know if she finished it. It's called Love Story, Eric Segal's Love Story. Eric Segal is very interesting because he's a professor of the classics, like those guys from those days, the Latin classics, Homer and the others. So he studied all that stuff, and then he writes this very, very simple, popular pulp fiction sort of love story. It's a very, very brief novel. I think it can't be more than, it can't even be 200 pages. But it's so moving and it's so well done. It's like you use all the skill of literary writing now in sort of a popular arena. And then, so it's one of those things. I think it just shows you the craft of the man. I was going to tell you three. I've told you three. The fourth is sort of very inspirational. I also don't have that. I have its sister. It's called Tandia. But the main book for me is called The Power of One. That's Bryce Courtney's The Power of One. And it traces the contradictions of a white South African boy wet-nursed by a black nanny, and goes on to sort of join the liberation movement. I have South African friends. Who sort of attempt to fit that profile. So on my shelf, you can see I have We the People by Albie Sachs. Albie Sachs got one of his hands blown off by a letter bomb when he was a rebel in Mozambique. But he's one of those ones. He's a white South African. He was in the Communist Party of South Africa, fought for freedom, ended up helping to write their constitution and so on. So it's got a lot of parallels. It's almost like I met Albie Sachs before I met him through Bryce Courtney. These people who are rule breakers, they are white. You have a white privileged class that's ruling, and they're like, no, we can't be part of that privilege. And so because of that, they are rebels and they suffer for it, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
But now in reflection, I like that thought, but in reflection with that, Makokha, when you reflect on what is currently happening today, let's look at Kenya. Does that thought, that approach to things exist in the space we are in today?
I'm always persuaded, or rather I am persuaded by the belief that people find their own vernacular in the midst of the agony. Yeah, and the manner in which you are going to cry will be genuine. If the pain threshold is high enough, the manner in which you scream, it is going to be genuine. So we will find our own way of expressing our agony and our pain, and somebody else, it might not feel it, but somebody else listening to it will be like, yep, I feel you, I feel what you're saying. So South Africans were able to do that, and I think there was a certain authenticity in the manner that they were able to do that. I came, I think in my college years, I came in contact with Bertolt Brecht, the famous, I think, in Kenya because of the Caucasian chalk circle. But he did many other things, including poems on reproductive health and other things about repression. And they pushed the frontiers. And so every person in distress finds their own voice and their own vernacular for expressing what they are feeling.
Yeah.
And for some it'll be more eloquent than others. For others, even in their crudity, even in the crudity of that poetry or lack of it, there's a certain eloquence that comes through. And I am, as I told you, I began as a reader. So when you are a reader, you allow for a lot more. You say, look, I might not know where you're taking me, but let me trust you for now. And if you don't bore the hell out of me, then I might just get something out of what you're saying.
Yeah. Wow. And if you're joining us now, today we are sitting with Kwamchetsi Makokha. Not ski, Tsi Makokha, who's read extensively and has a wide and a large body of works, a writer, a poet, a journalist, a policy advisor. You wear very many hats, Makokha. But now this is one of your shelves. I've heard that there is one in Ushago. I can see one across the room.
Yeah,
but
there's one in my bedroom where there's somebody, and so I don't want to take you there right now, otherwise you're going to interfere with with what they are doing.
So from the privilege of sitting next to this one, which would be your top 3 picks on this shelf?
That's Ernest Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms. That would be one if I'm looking at this. Sembene Usman. Got Bits of Wood. I'm trying to see anything. I mean, I have many favorites. That's the trouble. That's the trouble with readers. You have very many favorites. I'm trying to see. That too. The One Device. This is interesting. Brandt actually traces the history of the iPhone. The thing that combines all these things, computing, communication, music, everything, and the struggle to just create the one device, which you've ended up with in one thing called the iPhone. And so he traces that history. It's a fascinating read. It's not necessarily literary, but it's sort of like a bit journalistic. But it's very nice. But the companion piece to the One Device is Steve Jobs, Walter Isaacson. So those would be my 3. I could keep going. They're all my favorites, really. But let me just see. Let me see. In terms of theory, this was very useful. Yes. Noam Chomsky. Manufacturing consent. That helped me to sort of understand media. What else happened here? This was very influential growing up. It was very, very influential. And then 2 years ago, I read the companion piece, which sort of deflated me and then raised me. It's called The Dead Are Arising, which is a much bigger and fuller biography of Malcolm X. And it's sort of very educative because we have this fiery image of Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad and his struggles, which are true, but we don't have the context. And so this journalist who sort of finished this book, but didn't finish, his daughter finished it for him, does this opus, this magnum opus. It's about 500, should be about 500 pages. And it says The Dead Are Arising, and it traces the Nation of Islam from its founding and how Malcolm and his family got embraced into the Nation of Islam and their struggles and what they left behind. And it tells me that the autobiography, Alex Haley's The Autobiography of Malcolm X, is an important contribution, but it's like one blind person describing an elephant. So they've touched the trunk and they're telling you it's very hard. And there are 6 other parts. There's the foot, there's the ear, there's the tail, there's the body. There are many other parts. So that's the thing that reminds me of, is that truths are multiple. Yeah, that what we think we know
Yeah.
might not be complete.
Yeah. But now when you're thinking about Malcolm X, from the both pieces of literature you've interacted with, what comes to your mind when you think about the person in Malcolm X? What sets him apart?
One is just one is drive and conviction. And when you read The Dead Are Arising, you completely realize that his ideology had actually been fueled by a false narrative. For me, that was very deflating. This thing about the thing that they believed in, of like this a different American type of Islam, and even Malcolm X himself comes to that realization when he does his Hajj, when he goes for his Hajj in Makkah. He realizes that the version of Islam that they are following actually is not true Islam, that this is a concoction of something, and he does a course correction, and then of course he begins to make peace with the other black leaders in the US. There's a thing there, there's a righteous anger that Malcolm X delivers, but then there's also just the very embarrassing thing that he was actually wrong for so long. Yeah, that even the theological basis of his quarrel, of saying, blue-eyed whites are blue-eyed devils and so on. There was no theological basis. It wasn't Islamic. He was actually wrong on many of those counts. And for me, the frightful thing is that you can actually go very far when you are wrong. That's the frightful thing.
Okay.
Yes. But what does it say? It says, I think, if you're passionate and you're bold, you could do stuff. And we are just coming out of Easter, and we are reminded this guy, and now that of course the Pope has died, that's the what do you call it? That's the successor of Saint Peter. The character of Saint Peter in the Bible is that that's a guy who just moves. Then he does the thinking later. Yeah, he's like, this is the guy who's betraying Jesus. This is the guy who's going to arrest Jesus. He cuts off his ear. Yeah, damn the consequences. Yeah. Then after that, we deal with the consequences. Yeah, he's only one guy with a sword, and decides, no, yeah. So there's a thing there about conviction, and that conviction, I see it also in Malcolm X. Even if his convictions are wrong, he pursues his convictions to their logical conclusion.
Yeah.
The trouble is that if everybody, of course, decides to pursue their mistaken convictions to their logical conclusion, that's the thing that frightens me.
Yeah.
Because if all of us sort of believed all our prejudices and acted on them to their logical conclusion, we could actually deliver quite a bit of harm around the world.
It can be
so that's the part that I think worries me a little.
Yeah. Which I think it brings me back to this, and I would want to understand manufacturing consent. Take us to this one, because I'm picking that aspect of now from a journalistic perspective. You're telling stories, you're communicating, you're pushing narratives on the basis of your truths. Bring us to manufacturing consent.
Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman basically did this study that found that there are certain people who control media outlets or channels for communication, and they decide what the truth is. And then they whip everybody else to agree that that is the truth. And so that's what, in brief, that's actually what manufacturing consent is. Yeah, we get you to believe what somebody who owns the channels of communication believes is the truth. And that can be problematic, or that has actually been problematic. And Noam Chomsky, who now is no longer able to speak, he's still alive, but he's not able to speak, has been ostracized because of just thinking differently and exposing that whole network of people who control the media, controlling what society thinks. And so you find that even in our circumstances, people are very keen on what the media is saying, and they want to control what media is saying, because when you control the way people are thinking, then it makes it easier for you to rule them.
Yeah.
So that's why governments generally have a big interest in media. The media sits there with a promise that is going to deliver space for us to debate ideas freely. But in the process of that, there's a lot of intimidation. If you show up with an idea that people don't like, they're gonna harass you, they're gonna beat you up, they insult you, they do all sorts of things, they harass you into silence. Somebody else, I think around 1972, called that the spiral of silence.
Yeah.
Then there are others where government actually comes in and brutally decides either they're going to withdraw advertising or physically close you down or pass laws that make it difficult. And the whole idea is that they are trying to channel everybody to think in the same direction. Now, the way we know human beings, even people born of the same mother and same father don't think the same.
Yeah.
So why are we creating this artificial reality where we expect people to be thinking, to be reading from the same hymn sheet?
Yeah.
And that's really what manufacturing consent basically does. It's an elaborate process of making sure that people are thinking and speaking the same thing, which is a misnomer.
Yeah. How do you relate it to propaganda?
This is actually called the propaganda model.
Yeah.
Manufacturing consent is the softer version. What the Chomsky model of media is actually called the propaganda model of media, where you own the media and you use the media to control what people are thinking. You feed them what you think is the truth. Sometimes you come at now, of course, there's a whole field where you do disinformation and you feed people things that are false. You get them to believe that is true.
You're a communicator, you're a policy advisor, you've worked in very critical parts and worked in communication in very critical institutions. And from where you sit as a policy advisor, what's your take on propaganda as a strategy to, I don't want to say to redirect or shape perspectives?
My approach, and I think the record will speak for itself, my approach has always been level up. Level up with people, even in difficult circumstances. Just level up, tell them the truth. Tell them this is the truth. You might sequence it so that it all doesn't come out at the same time, but level up and tell people this is actually the situation. This is what has happened. If people have messed up, say we have messed up. Own up, and then say what else you're going to do. The outright lying, the unfortunate thing about lying is that with time, the truth emerges. So you must, and I don't do this sort of to adopt a holier than thou attitude. It comes from a very firm belief that with time, the truth is going to emerge. So you have to do a trade-off, which is that do you want to deal with the embarrassment of being called a liar 1 year or 2 months or 1 month down the line, or do you want to deal with owning up and saying, we have made a mistake and these are the steps that we are going to take.
Yeah.
So that's generally been my approach with regard to communication, especially in the places I've been privileged to serve, which is that try and tell the truth. Yeah. Even when things, and I've always been of that persuasion that when you are communicating, especially from a position of power, you must give people the truth and options of them participating in the decision making.
Picking on that, your recent work supports the ideologies of online platform support for victims of crimes and atrocities. What's the thought behind that?
A lot of it is about trying to take advantage of democratization. There's another guy favorite here, Manuel Castells. Talks about the power of identity. So that's about life in the information age. And it says that communities are becoming more powerful than government, and the reason is because they have access to information. The moment you put information as the ingredient for power, what we basically are changing, and I think we saw this in Kenya, what we're changing is that the most powerful person is not the person who is armed with an AK-47. It's the person who has ideas and has access to a communication channel. And the Gen Z protests in 2024 proved it beyond any doubt, any shadow of doubt. Yeah, you can be armed, you can have tanks, you can have everything, but you don't have control of the government. The government is actually controlled by people who have ideas and have the channels of communication.
Yeah,
it's a frightening thought. Yeah, and that's what Manuel Castells. Basically like. That's the typology that he discusses, and he goes and looks at the Zapatista and the Spanish the question in Catalonia and other places in South America. So it's a very, very broad read. So now, taking off from there, because some of us have been accompanying that growth over time, and we were saying we may be handicapped in terms of digital literacy. We might be handicapped in terms of digital literacy, in terms of how many people actually have a smartphone and can go to our website and whatever. But when you actually look at people who are able to access even short text messages, WhatsApp now that's becoming very popular, and people now even doing WhatsApp calls and all sorts of things, the digital literacy gap is not as big. And now when you get people into spaces where they are able to express themselves, and sometimes you just want people to say, we have refused. Yeah? In Gambia, that's all we got. People just saying, that's not the sort of justice and reconciliation we are looking for. Right? Post Yaya Jammeh. Yeah? So that's all we got. And in fact, some of it is like they came and they wanted to control the narrative of the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation, the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. They wanted to control what would come out, and they were silencing, because it's 97%. Gambia is 97% Muslim. And so it's very controlled around certain discussions around sexuality. And one of the things that had happened with Yaya Jammeh was that there was, of course, the big scandal about the HIV cures, which were not cures, and then the sexual exploitation and abuse of women, which included rape of people who would be recruited into beauty pageants, and then of course they would be exploited thereafter. And because of sensitivities, because of religious sensitivities, it being a fairly controlled, Muslim-controlled space where they didn't want this to become a discussion. So the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission elided, it completely avoided the questions of sexual violence. And now the Victims Bantaba, which was the platform that we created in the Gambia with that through Journalists for Justice and the Gambia Victims Center, helped the victims to come and say, no, that is not the whole truth. The full truth is that actually there were sexual violations. And there are sexual violations at various levels. At Yaya Jammeh and his cabinet level, at the military and police level, even at family level, there were things going on that you guys don't want us to talk about, and we are going to talk about them. So you see, in that way, you have inverted power. The guys with power are not the people in the commission. They are the people with the story. Right? Kenya and post-election violence. We went through post-election violence. We did our power sharing and whatever. And then, of course, we did the ICC thing which collapsed. But the people with the stories, every time they sit back and they tell you, I was rusticated from my land in Chepilat, or in Molo, or in whatever other space. You've got to sit up and listen. And you see, those stories are not going to go away. Right? So because of just that thing about the authenticity of those stories, and we've had similar experiences in Burundi. In Burundi, there were rivers of blood, and Burundi became a very, very closed society because of the president who was there at the time, and Nkurunziza, and there were a lot of abuses, and the place was repressed. The media, I think every week there was a journalist either being arrested or sort of having to flee. And so when that was happening, one of the things that then we ended up having to do was to create a safe space to say, you can't silence those voices. And so we created a safe space. I will not tell you which country they were based, but people had space. to be able to say, this is what happened to me in Burundi, this is what is happening to me or to my family or to my loved ones in Burundi. And there was also a space. And so for me, the creation of those victim spaces, those forums, is an act of claiming power and agency away from the people who wield guns.
Does it not still remain with the government? Because if you look at those reports, even here, the TJRC, most of these reports, the commission's reports that were commissioned by the president or the administration that was in power then, you'd collect that information, but you will still bring it to that person.
Yes, government has agency to do certain things, but it does not have power all the time. And that is why when Gen Z say, we don't want the finance bill, is there a Finance Act 2024 in Kenya? No. You have guns, you have the entire army. Yeah, it's 100,000 of them armed, and police, another 100,000 armed, and you can't do it. That tells you that the iteration and the performance of power has changed. There are people who are not armed with anything other than their mouths and their phones and placards, and they can stop you from doing something. Is that not power? Yeah. So I think power is shifting. The traditional way in which we are used to seeing power, as brute force showing up and armored cars and so on, it's completely changing. And people are negotiating how to deal with power, and even with police. All these stories we've had about abductions and whatever and brutality, we are also having a negotiation with police, because people are saying, look, and I think there have been stories and examples of prison officers, police officers who are saying, if this is the service, if this is what is required of this service, I down my uniform. I'm sorry. It might be one person, it might be two people, but it is such a powerful moral victory for somebody to be able to say, I cannot be part of a brutal and inhumane police service. That negotiation is happening. I don't know how long it will take, but in the end, you might end up, I'm not saying what's going to happen, in the end, you might end up having the police service saying, no, we will not take those kinds of orders, or we will not act on those kinds of orders.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a conversation, that Manuel Castells does in The Power of Identity. That once you have figured out who you are, then you begin to perform and exercise your power.
Yeah. Makokha, you've traveled and you've also written extensively. And with that thought, how comes we never get to really look at what is happening to Congo?
It's a difficult question. One is that there's the concept of narrowcasting. Narrowcasting means that you look for your audience online, you find a couple of thousand or maybe hundreds of thousands of people who like what you are saying, and they follow you. And so because of that, then we are not able to whip people the Noam Chomsky way. Can't whip people and force them to think in a certain direction. But also the plurality of media and spaces for expression means that you also have plurality of noise and confusion. And so the Congo story, in my view, has been distorted because of a lot of disinformation. There are, I think, three strands of the Congo conversation. The first, of course, is the conversation of conflict, war, and disorder, which is that Congo is ungovernable. It's too large, it's unwieldy, it's ungovernable. But we don't go far enough to unpack the factors that make it ungovernable, which is that for you to drive from one end of the DRC, to the other, might take you probably 2 days. It's a vast country. Yeah. You remember when there was a plane that was lost, a Kenyan plane that was lost somewhere in the Congo? Yeah. It took people like a week to get to the site. Congo is a very, very big country. So sometimes when we even talking about it, we don't put things in context. Two, there are also competing narratives. One is that Congo is home to minerals. Yeah, very, very important minerals that are in demand in the rest of the world, and there are people who want those minerals. So they have a vested interest in also telling us a story that either muddies the waters or shifts the blame somewhere else. Issue number 3 is that Congo is the bastard son of Leopold of Belgium. And Leopold did a few things in there that were crazy, which, for example, included cutting off people who couldn't, if people couldn't work hard enough or fast enough, he cut off one hand. Yeah, if there are certain people who are sort of not doing certain things that the colonial people who are there, the way that they enforced labor, was very brutal. And that has sort of like come down right up to the Rwanda genocide. Now, quick fact. In 1995-96, when the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda was sitting, they sent out warrants of arrest for over 1,500 people who were involved in the genocide. 1,000 of those people are thought to be in Europe, living comfortably, hiding, but for at least 500 are in Congo. I want to take you back a little. 500 people, 30 years ago, 31 years ago actually, they were doing Kwibuka 31. So 31 years ago, some 500 people who had taken part in the genocide, the deliberate killing of the Tutsi to wipe them out, escaped to the Congo. They set up families. They have been raising children. So if there are 500, I would like you to extrapolate how many are they likely to be and what have they taught their children? So when we even talk about rebel movements and fractious rebel movements, we are actually missing part of the point. Part of the point is that DR Congo is a continuation of the genocide that was not completed in Rwanda. Right? So all these things are, how do you tell that story? And who is willing to listen to that story? Because it's very complex. It's a complex story. It's very easy for us to jump onto the mineral story.
Yeah.
Because maybe you can see money and you can see unfair, whatever. But there is also a human story. And that's why Kagame gets involved, and he gets involved from a moral standpoint, which is like, these people came and they determined to wipe out a whole community of Tutsis, killed 1 million of them.
Yeah.
Right? 500 of them escaped into DR Congo, where they have been living comfortably, raising families, making money, and doing other things. Another 20,000 people involved in the genocide, 20,000, were convicted by the Gashasha courts in Rwanda, and they just completed their 20-year sentence last year. In fact, those 20,000, they have not expressed remorse for what they did, and they are back in society. So my argument is that the Congo story is very complex. It's very, very complex. It requires commitment. It requires energy to be able to tell it. And sometimes the way we approach it is that we want to approach it in slapstick fashion. We want to massage it and finish with it. You can't finish with that story. That story, if you read, there's a guy called William Atwood. William Atwood was the first U.S. ambassador to Kenya. He wrote a book called The Blacks and the Reds, the Reds and the Blacks. And there's a whole 2 chapters of the crisis in the Congo. That's the time when Kasavubu and Mobutu were having this struggle, 1963. Right? Yeah. So it's an old story. Yeah. And the question then, I think I would throw it back to you, which is that the people who are in communication spaces is that are we willing to go that far back and ask those hard questions of a story that is 65, 70 years old? Maybe even 100. Because if you trace it back to Leopold, it's going to be 200 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if that sort of deals with you.
It does. And I don't know what you think about that conversation. What's your take? Leave us a comment on the comment section. Today we are privileged to sit with Mr. Makokha, Kwamchetsi Makokha, a writer, poet, policy advisor, a communicator par excellence. And you can see a large body of works that is available online. You can Google him, you can check him out. But what does this conversation bring to you? When you hear this conversation, what does it bring to you? And do we take a moment to reflect on the information that you have? Do you take a moment to reflect on it, to ask yourself, whose truth is it? That thing that is in your head right now, that thing that you've been considering as the truth, whose truth is it? And what might be the other conversation on the other side of that truth? Let me know what you think on the comment section. But Kwamchetsi, as we wind up, you picked this book and I found it very interesting. And I feel like
hardback.
Yes, I'd really.
There are 3 in 1 actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd want to hear. Tell us about this book.
For the conscious, Ernest Hemingway is not necessarily your go-to writer, but he's very persuasive. I like the way he is able to employ the facility of language to tell very, very moving stories, ordinary life stories. So, A Farewell to Arms is a story of a young man who falls in love in the middle of a war. That's it. And then, of course, it doesn't work out, right? So it's got all those elements of a love story that doesn't go well, but it takes you through the shift of emotions, the shift of emotions, and it makes you contemplate the whys and the hows of things as we receive them, because we are raised to know, you fall in love and then you settle with the person that you love. Poetry teaches us otherwise. Poetry tells us that actually there's no pain, there's no poem.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no pain, there's no poem.
No poem.
So it's a bit sad.
Yeah.
I can take this again back into Kenyan Speak. And the Kenyan Speak, for me, the most frustrating thing about no pain, no poem, is that the Kenyan story is beautiful partly because it's very painful. It's painful because if you now read people who are publishing on the left, I'm referring to people who are publishing like Vita books. They have a new book coming out now called From Mau Mau to Ruto Must Go. And they've done a whole series on Makan Singh. They've done the struggle between Kanu A and Kanu B and KPU and so on. And there's so much pain and betrayal, so that it's never a straight line. The thing that I'm learning from literature is that life is never a straight line. It's not linear. And the things that you expect, that is where the climax is going to be. That's where you'll find an anticlimax. Yeah. And the places where you least expect, you think this is the takeoff, actually that's the climax. So that unpredictability for me is, I think the thing that draws me into these spaces.
Yeah. Makokha, there is no Kenyan author who's made it to these quick picks. What's your thought about?
She's sitting on my Kitale shelf.
Yes.
Yeah, Yvonne Adhiambo Award.
Yeah.
I think Dust is a magical piece of work. Because it's Kenyan, it's got authenticity, then it's got beauty, and it's got intelligence. It's very, very well written. That's one book I would tell. I wish I had the power to do the things that people at curriculum development do. I would make every Kenyan child read that book. The other book that's not here, talking about Kenyan writers, is Kinyanjui Kombani's The Last Villains of Molo. I was privileged to actually I was moderating the launch event, and he got the late Professor Eshiwani there and several other people and his family. Nice, whatever. But then I read it and I was like, wow, it had such depth. It's sort of, it crosses that, remember the conversation we were having about urban literature and the rural ideal. And Kinyanjui Kombani is able to combine the grime and muck of lower income living in the city, because part of that novel is based in Gando, Dagoretti. The other is in Molo, in rural Kenya. So he fuses these two worlds and then creates this cocktail with the state. and the confrontations that people are having in terms of navigating their space with whatever, and it's a mirror of the ethnic clashes. The ethnic clashes. So it's a very eloquent statement on the ethnic clashes in Kenya. There are others like Billy Kahora, who's done the true story of David Munyake, which is like almost like it's non-fiction. It's non-fiction, but it's very well done. So I have a lot of admiration for Kenyan writers. Yeah. As I told you, I was a manuscript reader, so yeah. I read a lot of Kenyan writers, yeah. And many of them are very decent, very hardworking. I've read Stanley Gazemba's The Stony Hills of Maragoli. I think it's a different flavor. It's a very well done book. There are very many. There's Peter Kimani. By the way, Peter Kimani is not here. The Dance of the Jacaranda. There are very many new and upcoming, and of course there are also older ones. Yeah, there are older ones. There are older ones like I was looking at Jande's Ambition here. I think. Oh no, this is Daniel Wako. This is Amos Wako's father. So he wrote this about the Luya. But there's one, I think it's called Jande's Ambition. Asenath Bole Odaga. So I am taking a very keen interest on people who are doing children's literature, because that's where you build the next army of readers and thinkers. Yeah. And you see, if you're going to raise children on Cinderella and Tintin and Asterix, and then they lose interest because either it is too far removed or those stories don't speak to their reality, it's you to blame. If Kenyans are not reading, it's you to blame. We've laid the wrong foundation. Yeah, the foundation that we are laying is wrong. I think there are enough Kenyan writers. They are doing great work. We've made publishing very difficult. We made publishing very expensive and very difficult. And so because of that, then you find that we are not producing as much as we should. Yeah. So people are reading, but they are not reading as much Kenyan as they should.
Yeah. Who would you say is the most underrated Kenyan author?
Major Mwangi.
Why do you say so?
Because Major is multi-talented. Major helped us to navigate the urban spaces in the 70s, from going down River Road, the Cockroach Dance, Kill Me Quick, Carcass for Hounds. Then he's done a few others. I remember the one that I wrote a report for before it became a novel. It's called The Last Plague, which was, I think, his take on HIV/AIDS. Major has managed to remain very contemporary, but he's also he's intelligent in a very soft way. He's intelligent in a very soft way, and he reads society so spot on. So when he actually presents characters, you can feel and touch them. Yeah.
Would you say, or do you have books that you can say has or have helped you understand Kenya?
Yes, I think it should be among the first one there, right there. Marjorie Oluthe McGoy, Coming to Birth. That helped me to understand 69, because that talks about the Mboya assassination and what was going on. And then now it is filled in by Dust. Yvonne Adhiambo War helps me now to understand Dust. I'm trying to see. There are also the sort of dramatic experiments of Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Michere Githae Mugo, the trial of Dedan Kimathi, which is that they reimagine, they go into this trial. Of course, it's curated. It actually happened. So they go in there, they pick this trial of Dedan Kimathi, and they write a drama. They write a drama about it. So, and you're like, okay. And you see the sort of reverse power roles, and you have Kimathi sort of speaking differently and so on. So I mean, yeah, there are many people who've sort of done that sort of thing. Top of my head, of course, Imbuga is a towering figure. As you might realize now, when I begin going into that direction, I begin betraying the fact that I studied performing arts. So I love the theater. Yeah. I love the theater, and I'm very empathetic to the fact to playwrights, because I think writing drama is harder. Writing drama tends to be harder than writing a novel. Whereas novels, you can sort of anyone can tell their story, but drama requires a bit of technique. Poetry requires both skill and technique.
And pain.
And pain. Yeah.
Yeah. You've also co-written a couple of books. Talk to us about the literary works that you've worked on.
The correct phraseology is co-edited.
Co-edited.
Yes, my first co-edited was with my professor of literature, Arthur Luvai. So we did Echoes Across the Valley. Echoes Across the Valley is a collection of poems from East Africa, in the hope that it was going to succeed Poems from East Africa by David Cook and David Rubadiri. And I think it's done very well. This book is now in its 15th reprint from the year 2000, and it keeps doing very well. It's got a very interesting mix because the selections were very deliberate in terms of theme and in terms of geography. And we also pulled in even, I think, one contributor from Liberia, because we were not able to locate West Africa very quickly. So I think it's a very, very rich mix. It's a very rich mix of the voices from this part of the world. Largely, many of these were actually poems that had been sent in to the publishers and they were sitting on shelves, and the publisher didn't know what to do with them. Because, you send in 2-3 poems, what is the publisher supposed to do with that? And so some of those poems go back, I think, back to the 90s, early 90s, probably some of them late 80s, but they'd never been published before. And so we got together with Professor Luvai and Jimmy Makokha, who was then production and publishing director at East Africa Education Publishers, who pushed us and said, no, just broaden it. And so we went out, looked at other writers, and Tanzania was sort of struggling with English, but there were people who were writing in English, writing poetry in English, like Richard Mabala. And so we put this collection together. And then, of course, there were very exciting new voices, from like Susan Chiguli from Uganda, and then, of course, the others in Rubadiri's children and others. And so we put together this collection, and it was a slow burn because it didn't take off. It didn't take off as widely as we thought. But I think it's a very solid contribution from East Africa. I have 4 poems in there. We were limiting what the editors would contribute. We didn't want to contribute more than any of the other. So in terms of just sort of democratizing the voice, I had 4 poems in there. Professor Luvai has 5, I think. Then everybody else has 5 or less. And so that allowed us to have a bit of variety of voices, both young and old, but also from the region. The other thing I've sort of co-edited, and I think this also now speaks to what I think I need now move from there to the next phase, because I'm sort of helping. I'm in this maternity wing of literature where I'm helping to midwife the production of literature. So that was one. Then we also curated stories from the post-election violence, women's voices from the post-election violence in 2008 with Rosemary Okello Olale. And we put that together in a collection called My Trauma, My Pain. And those stories talk about what women experience and how they coped and how they did resilience and got out of there. The third one, of course, came out 3 years ago, and that was Beacons of Judiciary Transformation. That was co-edited with Professor Sylvia Kangara and Duncan Okello. That's a collection of speeches by former Chief Justice Willie Mutunga. Speeches, scholarly articles, and public lectures. So if somebody actually wanted to sort of understand the thing that he was trying to do with the judiciary transformation when he took over as CJ, a reading of Beacons of Judicial Transformation gives you an almost full picture of what he was trying to do, because it curates all those moments, but now it's curated in prose. And then, of course, there's one interview he did that tells you all the things he likes, including that he's a sweet tooth, he likes chocolates, those kinds of things. So yeah, putting that together and putting stuff together is one of the things I actually have done. I also helped put this together. This was Willie Mutunga's. Willie Mutunga for more than 10 years wrote a column in the Daily Nation undercover. No one knew that it was him writing. So he wrote this under a pseudonym. It's called Cabral Pinto. And so you can see it's quite voluminous.
Yes.
And it's not everything. So we selected them and then we arranged them and put that together. So I think it's also becoming a specialty of sorts. I help people to put their thoughts together and curate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just sticking with this, what's your current thought on the judiciary, where it is today? The Kenyan judiciary.
Is this a trick question? I think it's growing. It is not where it was. The judiciary is not where it was in 2011, 2012. Because at that time, I would have said it was in a very difficult place. Kenyans didn't have much confidence in it. Right now, I think if the confidence has gone down, it is because Kenyans expect better. They've raised the standards of expectations. So there might be misunderstandings in terms of the expectations and what they're able to deliver. But the judiciary is doing very, very well in certain respects. I was just recently did an article for The Nation where, as you probably are aware, I am a contributor, I'm a weekly contributor. So I recently just did an article basically saying 90% of the cases done by the judiciary are handled by magistrates. And you know, our magistrates they handle between 1,554 cases to 2,264 cases a year, a single magistrate. Which means that on average, that magistrate could very easily, if they are not working weekends or whatever, they could very easily be doing 20, 30 cases a day. The magic number is that 257, they close 257 cases. They end 257 cases every year. So the bulk of the justice system in Kenya is actually working. So the cases of the big and the powerful, those ones are the ones that give us problems because then, you find judges are getting intimidated, you are cutting the judiciary budget and so on. But generally, the state of justice in Kenya is actually working. One is that the magistrates are working very, very hard. That's one. Number two is that we did a very novel thing during Justice Maraga's time there. And this thing of launching online courts, virtual hearings, it's a runaway success. Even 2 Indian Supreme Court judges came here to actually study how it works. So in terms of like lawyers sitting somewhere in their bundus in a village in Kilifi or in Kakamega or in Busia or in, Elgeyo Marakwet, you can wake up and actually go to court from the comfort of your home and argue. And you don't have to travel to Nairobi and get killed in a road accident. Yeah. So all those things where, lawyers would say, give me an adjournment because I'm not in Nairobi, I'm attending to another matter, are reducing. And being able to sort of like just dispense justice in a fairly quick way is reducing the pain that people are feeling. I don't know about, and I think also corruption, when you look at the Corruption Perception Index from the EACC, the judiciary is doing much, much better than it was doing, say, 10 years ago. So I think there are improvements. But I think I also see that there is, and maybe this is something I need to write about in future, which is that the demands for justice from Kenyans are rising, and Kenyans expect higher and better. So there's now a TikTok court. There's a court that where people take matters and people sitting on TikTok and they hear and they pass judgment. I watched that. I was actually watching that this morning. I was like, wow. So if that is where the demand side is that people are online and they are saying, we can actually try our own cases on TikTok and pass judgment. So if you are then going to come in as the formal magistrate or judge, you've got to do better than that.
Wow. I've not had a chance to interact with Willie Mutunga. He's one of the person I just by observing what he does and the things he's done, and even his time as the CJ, I found him cool, firm. But as somebody who's worked closely with him, as somebody who's read his works, as compiled, has put together his works, what is that one thing you'd say people have never understood about Willie Mutunga?
I think he is a very underrated intellectual. He's probably one of Kenya's most underrated intellectuals in terms of just thinking deeply about this country, this society, this continent, this world. He's put his mind to all the issues that we have confronted, and he sort of has some sort of answers. They are not perfect, but he has thought about a lot of these problems. And it's not something that he did yesterday. He's done it from when he was like 30. Yeah. So, and now I think he should be turning 76 or so this June. Yeah. So that's about 45 years of just thinking about the same problem. There must be something there. Yeah, there has to be something there, I think.
Your writing touched majorly on identity. As I noted in the two books, My Trauma, My Pain, and Echoes of Valleys, in one's voice, one's identity, and healing your poems majorly. Why is it so? Why do you place those as a key pillar in your work?
I don't think I do. I think the circumstances place them as key pillars. We go through a world of strife and dissension, and as human beings, we are largely broken. And so we are looking for wholeness. And for you to be able to find wholeness, you've got to heal. So for me, it's just a natural progression, which is things that are broken need to be mended. Yeah, things that are broken need to be mended. Things that are sort of shaved off need to be made whole. Because human beings are better human beings when they are whole. Yeah, broken human beings break the world.
And I think Makokha, it's really, really, really a privilege to sit with you besides one of your shelves. And as we conclude, there is the final segment of this conversation where a guest always recommends a book to my guest. They don't know who, and we don't know who is going to be our next guest, but my previous guest recommended Auko Tendo's Rough Silk.
Yes.
I don't know if you've read Rough Silk.
Yes, I've read it, but I can reread it.
Yes.
I have no problem with second, third readings.
Yes.
Yes. You always see something that you didn't see the first time round.
Yeah. So having read it, maybe your quick thoughts on the book.
It's a powerful memoir, and memoirs are they are growing up, they are coming of age as a genre in Kenya.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who are telling personal stories, and I think they should. But the ability to turn memoir into a genre and a form of art, Tendo, I think Deborah does a very good job. And that because of, and I think one for the politicians who've sort of been struggling, it's a sort of instructional manual on that it's a trade-off. For me to read your memoir, you have to trade off. You have to give me something of yourself. You have to trade off by giving a bit of your authenticity. And I think she lays that out there in terms of that troubled but very interesting relationship with her father.
Yes. Yeah. And as a father, how do you relate to some of the context of that book?
It's very difficult. Being a father is very hard work. Yeah. Sometimes I ask myself, if that's one of the jobs I think I was least suited for. But they don't appoint the most qualified. Yeah. You just find yourself in that position. Yeah. We try, I guess. It's a struggle every day. That's a judgment I leave to my children. They'll be able to say what sort of father they thought I was.
Do you think fatherhood has changed with time?
It has. It has evolved. It evolves because it comes from our notions of society and our expectations of who and what men ought to be. Sometimes those expectations clash with reality. And sometimes the way then that role is performed will either meet or fail to meet certain expectations. But I think I am seeing a completely different breed of fathers. They are more vulnerable, they are more emotional, they are more open, they are more accessible. They are a bit different from the fathers we experienced in the 60s and the 70s, who are austere, distant, authoritative, even authoritarian. I think it's changing. It's changing dramatically. Yeah.
So now this gives us a chance now to ask you to recommend a book to my next guest.
Should I recommend something I have read or something I'm trying to read? I picked up Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Dream Count. I haven't begun reading it, so maybe that's what I would recommend.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've read Americana, I've read Half of a Yellow Sun, I've read Purple Hibiscus. They are brilliant. And That Thing Round Your Neck, it's a collection of short stories. Chimamanda is always really exciting. So that's why I picked up Dream Count. Life has gotten in the way, so I have not begun. But as you can see, it's here. It's here. So I'm going to start. And so that's the one I would recommend, so that we are at par with your next guest. So when you finish with him, you can check in with me to see if I've actually finished mine as well.
All right.
Right.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Kwamchetsi Makokha has been our guest today on What's on Your Shelf. What are your thoughts on this conversation? Brilliant reflections on we've traversed Africa through literature. And I wish we had more time to even do it further, because I had an amazing conversation with him before the show. But this is what we had time for today. Thank you so much for joining with us to the very end. It's been amazing. What part of this conversation has left a mark in your mind or in your heart? What do you think about some of the thoughts and reflections that we've had on this show today? Feel free to share with us your comments and on the comment section, and be sure we will be able to respond and give feedback where there is. If you have any questions for Mr. Makokha, who is here with us, he is within our networks, and be sure we will be able to get those questions to him. And I want to promise you, with the person I have met today, he will respond to them. So feel free to share with us your comment, your views and reviews, and we will be happy to interact with that. And as we come to a close of this podcast, remember What's on Your Shelf is brought to you in partnership with the Nuria Bookstore, which is the leading online bookstore in Kenya today, 4 years in a row, and they're doing an amazing work. They call themselves the home of African books. Most of the authors we've spoken about here today are stocked there at Nuria, international bestsellers. Find them. They're on the first floor of the Bazaar Plaza, but also you'll find them online at nuria.com. Also, this is brought to you in partnership with the Kenya National Library Service, who are the custodians of Kenya's literary and library works. Check them out also at knls.ac.ke. KNLS has a wide range of services beyond the physical libraries that there exist, which I always say my favorite part of that library is the kids section. There is a large profile of services that they offer that you can access. Check them out at knls.ac.ke. And this marks the end of our conversation today. I've been your host, Mulure Mike, and starting this week, we have an opportunity to sit and interact with book clubs. And we will be asking you, feel free to invite us to sit with your book club and just hang out with you guys and check out the books that you're reading. And this week, we had an opportunity to sit with the Kenton's College Books Club. And here is a preview of what we interacted with in that club.
Just to help us understand, Melissa.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit. Let's know about the book club.
Okay, so the book club is a book club that brought teachers together in Canton who love reading. And it was formed, I believe, as part of mental well-being, as part of an initiative by the school to just ensure that people were taking care of themselves outside of the school, because the workload is quite strenuous. So teachers came together who love to read. I joined them, I believe, 1 or 2 years later, but in the 1.5 years that I have been, it has been worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, I'm almost speaking Swahili to say Karibu Kenya.
Asante sana.
You've been here for a while,
For 5 years.
for 5 years. What else, other than the book club, what have you enjoyed as being part of this community?
I think I love book club because at school, we're all in different parts of the school. So some of us teach the seniors, some teach the juniors. And I think before book club started, you sort of knew people in the staff room, but you didn't necessarily have long chats with them. So I love book club because I get to spend time with people discussing something that I love, books and different reading, and hearing about the books that they love. So getting to know different people who you might just end up as colleagues, but now every 1.5 months or so you end up spending an evening with and having lots of fun with. So I think it's a good way of forming friendships beyond just working alongside people.
So I want to dive straight into it. And the first book I'm holding in my hands, The Island of Sea Women. So maybe, Irene, give us a quick background of this book.
As we mentioned earlier, we were following the American election very passionately, and I think majority of us were rooting for the female candidate. And I think the book somehow lent itself, and as you know, when you read the book, if you read the book, you'll see that this particular island is actually very led by the matriarchs. The women are in charge, the women look for food, the women bring the money in, the men stayed at home, they looked after the children. And even when the war came, it's the women who were most disrupted, which then, of course, disrupted the whole community. So I feel it sort of naturally lent itself to that season in history. And it was for me quite a change from the norm. I think it was quite surprising to see how this particular community was set up.
Yeah. Maybe just to give it context, just maybe to help somebody understand the synopsis of the story, so that as we are referring to the difference in, even if somebody has not read the book, they would still understand, or maybe they would want to follow, or it will spark an interest in them wanting to look for the book, to read it for themselves. A quick run through.
It's about these two women, Mija, and forgive my pronunciation of their names, and I think Yamsuk, or whichever way they pronounce. So they are sea divers from Korea, and it was rather quite a big thing then. Again, I can't pronounce this. Hainyu. I can spell it in my head. I'm not sure how to say it, but they are sea divers. So they met as young girls in quite odd circumstances and built such a great friendship based on loyalty, and just a very strong bond. And the war happens, and it sort of breaks that. And it's quite sad to see that break, because it's something that was, built so strongly, and then it's just disrupted. And now I think it starts when Young-suk is a grandma, she's old, and the grandchild starts talking to her, and she doesn't know at the time. And then it takes us back now through flashback how everything unfolded.
Knowing about this thing about the Korean women being sea divers, I find that absolutely fascinating, what they actually do. And I've even watched videos about it. And it's something, and I look at it and I'm thinking, wow, these women are something. And to think, I can't even imagine myself going to do that, because it must be so difficult, but they have done it for so many years, and for them it's like, it's nothing. They just do it because that's their life, that's what they know. And I think that's a great inspiration for me. And whenever I see something like that, it's just an inspiration, which is something like, I need to read that book, I need to see what's happening there.
Yeah, in fact.
Yeah.
Michelle, what would you say holds the spine of this book?
I think to me it was relationships. The ones that were the bit that I just found made me cry, which is probably one that Patience and the others will say we don't even remember that bit, was when the granddaughter was talking to her grandmother about it. And there's a description of how they held hands and they felt that the stories moved just in that small action. And so I think the relationships between the generations, between the friends, and like Grace was saying, in a part of the world I don't know a lot about, a part of history maybe I should be embarrassed to say I didn't know a lot about. But I think it's the relationships and how they grow and they go through ups and downs, which I think all of us know happens with relationships, but we're fortunate not in such dark circumstances. I found it quite a hard book to read. I had to take a little break in the middle. But I think that's because the relationships were so strong and so, I can't even think of the word, emotional to each other and then to the reader, that I think that's the spine of the book.